So, hello everybody. This is a recorded conversation between Viv, Tim, and myself to precede the meditation support group, which will happen on Monday at 9:30. The meditation support group is about receiving support and offering support for our personal practice of meditation contemplation. And the conversation which we're going to have today is a discussion really about our experience of a particular aspect of our meditation contemplation practice. And we pretend no expertise in this, but simply wish to share with you our experience and hope to hear yours on Monday if you'd like to join us. So the meditation support group takes place every month, and last month our focus was on the breath, whether we use it or not, and to do with that meditation technique, if that's what it can be called. This morning we are going to focus on how we concentrate our minds at the beginning of our sitting, beginning of our practice. And I'm going to hand over to you, Viv, because this idea for a topic today came from you, so I may have interpreted it wrongly already. But anyway, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. I don't think you've misinterpreted it. A couple of days ago, I was with a group of people who I've met through a writing group, and one of them suddenly said to me, "Viv, I want to learn to meditate. How do I do it?" Just there, right? So that started me thinking about it, and when I was later writing to her, I thought about the need that I feel for some sort of image or focus at the beginning of the meditation. It may be carried right through, or as one deepens into meditation contemplation, and these are terms that sometime we should perhaps talk about.
Yeah.
We hold it's a way of giving the mind something to do as one is trying to get below the mind. And there are various ways of doing it. I sometimes use a phrase from the Bible or a psalm, like be still and know that I am God, or I am love. And one repeats that phrase in the mind, and as one notices that the mind has run off onto some other topic, one comes slowly back to that. Sometimes I use an image, perhaps a jewel, like an emerald or a sapphire, and just keep coming back to it as soon as you notice that the mind has run away. And at the risk of talking too much, a thing that I recalled when I was writing to this friend was somebody saying to me once at the beginning of a meditation, rest your mind on, in this case it was a candle flame.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed to me the perfect phrase, because it carries that sense that as you're sitting for meditation, you're becoming quiet. And you're also trying to give the mind a rest
Yes.
from its endless ramblings.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you. Yes, I think that idea of resting the mind, I like that very much as well. And because for me, the idea of concentrating, that just the idea of it sounds like very hard work, and it's quite putting off. Um, when I sort of realized that concentration means to center, it helped me a lot. Um, yes, so to rest the mind, to be able to lean back in a way, um, and to have something to entrain the mind so that we don't have to make all the work. I find that very helpful too. Tim, what do you use? How do you practice?
Well, I use sometimes it, the as time passes. I think perhaps I've become less focused on the method, but I think there's a real key in that phrase that you've both mentioned, or that word that you've both mentioned, which is to rest into the meditation. It's if we chase something, then although that thing that we chase actively may become our focus, and therefore other thoughts are less insisting. It's the activeness of chasing. Right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a mantra here, and I'm going to keep repeating this mantra, for example. But that mantra has the potential to lead us away from meditation if we simply actively going after it. It's the resting on it that allows us to meditate, I think. Meditation, I think, is not something we do necessarily. It's something that happens by the grace of God. We can place ourselves. And so those instructions which often I give, for example, at the beginning of a meditation, about posture, about sitting, they're still part of my practice. I will sit and do that consciously. And then I may introduce a mantra or a word. And yeah, be still was for years my mantra doing centering prayer. I was attracted to centering prayer, for example, more than a method where we say the mantra non-stop all the way through. It suited me better, so that the mantra or the phrase, be still, would fall away, but then noticing thoughts beginning to invade and my attachment to those thoughts, I would reintroduce, be still, be still, be still. But as you both have noticed, once we start talking, we could just go on for quite a long time. So I'm going to stop now, but I would like to at some point bring in sound and breath. But for now, that's all I'll say, and ask you both again. So right now in your practice, like if you take a few days generally, is there a particular method that you are favoring at the moment?
Well, always begin with deep breaths, feeling the weight of the body on the seat or the stool, always a sort of settling of the physical body into a state of comparative stillness, with the intention of leaving it to its own devices and coming into mind and soul. And really what I meant when I said the focus was having done that, what is a useful focus. And I think sometimes for me, it's difficult to explain, I have a sense of there being my mental place, and somewhere it's always down for me. Somewhere I'm trying to get down underneath all that to a deep stillness underneath. And sometimes I'll use the word silence or stillness, or sometimes just the thought. But I have to say that times when I get beyond that, I might calm down, I might become less stressed or less angry or whatever it might be, but only very rarely and for the briefest seconds have I actually touched something underneath all that, I think, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, for me, prayer is really important. So uh, I usually start with in our Sufi practice we have an invocation, and it begins with "Towards the One," and towards the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, and then goes on. I don't remember it in this odd way. Towards the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty.
The only way be
Yes. Well,
united
united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. That for me is a very focusing and gathering prayer. And I also use the Lord's Prayer. And so for me, using prayer as such reminds me that what I'm doing is sacred. It reminds me of the sacred. And then like you both, posture is really important, and I often find that I'm very tense when I sit to meditate. And so just focusing on my body, sometimes what I do is an awareness practice. I think it's similar to mindfulness, which is breathing into the body and then finding space in the body, breathing into the mind, finding a space underneath the mind, a bit like you're saying, the depth of the body, the depth of the mind. And then the heart, what's going on emotionally, and then the peace that, that passes all understanding in the heart below that. And then breath, as we discussed last time. I find breath as a very marvelous focus. And as I work with my breath, I either through a particular practice or simply noticing what my breath is doing, I find that very centering and grounding. And I do use mantra. I've had a problem with the sort of the way that centering prayer is spoken about, in the sense of sometimes when people speak about it, the word is talked about. The word or mantra is talked about um, uh, uh, like it's a kind of some lower form, which should be discarded as soon as you possibly can. I know that is not the essence of centering prayer, but the way it's talked about sometimes, which I find a bit troubling, because the use of sacred word or phrase, I think it is an experience is very, very helpful in awakening one's own potential. I was only thinking this morning as I had a bath, actually, thinking about our conversation, that in the Aramaic we've worked with before in retreat and so on. The mantra, one might say, Allah Huba, God, the creative love. I was just that came to mind, and I thought, what a beautiful, beautiful, sacred sound to be practicing and awakening within oneself. But all of this leads into the contemplative state. If in my experience, if I can get there, and into that silent attunement.
Yes, I mean, obviously we've got the same background, and in meditation in Sufism, sound is very important, and repetitive sound. And I think I mean, there are different kinds of meditation out there, but sometimes repetitive sound, especially spoken aloud, can take one beyond the physical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what the whirling dervishes are about.
Mm-hmm.
That's repetitive movement.
Mm.
All over the world, there are civilizations where dance is used. I think all these things are trying to get one beyond the physical into a space that is still part of us, but is somehow bigger than our normal experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you have to have somewhere to start.
Yes.
I think sound, if speaking a word aloud can be helpful because the vibrations touch and gather the vibrations of one's being in some way.
Mm. Mm. To gather the vibrations of one's being. I'm sure that's just the way it came out just then, but would you say more about that?
I mean, we're all constantly in a state of vibration, and those vibrations have their own sound. It's below the level of our hearing, but it's kind of there underneath. And if we voice a repetitive sound, all those sounds of ourselves, so to speak, can be drawn together and become unified, so that we can go beyond them.
Kind of oneing. Julian of Norwich was it used the term oneing, or oneing through repeating a particular sound. Would it be a good idea if we do what we said just now, which is to clarify the process of what we loosely call meditation, contemplation? I was thinking of the sequence of our practice of concentration, meditation, contemplation, realization or unification. In Eastern practice, the terms are the other way around, but the reality is the same. It's concentration, contemplation, meditation, realization. But in the Christian tradition, we have it concentration, which we're talking about today mainly, and then leading to meditation. Focusing the mind and training the mind with the thinking or the imaginal process, and then the meaning, and then coming into the contemplative state. I mean, where are we talking about today in that process, do you think?
For me, it's all one. It's whatever method we use, and all the methods that we've spoken of so far. Eventually are taking us into that resting in silence, resting in no-thingness, resting in no doing, no method, no nothing, no thinking. But that's really hard. That's really hard to wish that we can do. So we could be talking at about any point in that kind of map you just gave us, because we might enter at one point, and we might enter into silence. We might descend from the head to the heart, and be completely open. But then something distracts, and so come back to something. We come back to
Mhm.
something. But
Mhm.
for me, and it may be just my personality and relationship with God and the universe, doesn't fit into like there was almost a linear nature to what you said when you mapped out that process, if it is a process. For me, it's all part of the same thing, and it's not one or the other. The beginning is a beginning, I guess. We might decide, right, okay, so at 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning I'm going to meditate, for example. And then there needs to be discipline to do that. And then one of you was mentioning earlier on about the stiffness. I think it was Joe.
Tension, yeah.
When you come to meditate, your body's in a stiffness, and our minds can be like that as well. And we can be thinking, right, it's 6 o'clock. I've got to meditate now. I've got half an hour here. I'm going to do this now, but all of that thinking is really, but it's all natural, completely natural. But it's all in the way, isn't it? So, um,
Yeah, so what I was meaning when I said let's talk today about focus was how we find a way to draw all that together
yeah,
with the intention of, if you like, quietening it down in order then to go beyond the focus. The focus is not an end in itself.
Mhm.
The focus is a way of bringing together and letting go of all that busyness and determination and all that, and part of stilling the body and relaxing the body and so on. And like as Joe said, it's so part of me. I forgot to say that I always begin. I sit down in my meditation place. I let go, and there's a great feeling of I've come home sort of feeling. And then I will say the invocation from the heart, and then focus on whatever I use.
yeah,
But it's all a means to the end, which is to get rid of all that. But I have to say, I rarely achieve getting rid of all that. But even the process of attempting is in itself restful somehow and nourishing.
So music, for me, breath instruments very much help this process, as does the Aramaic that Joe, you were mentioning. There's something about resounding the words that are very likely to be the words that were on Jesus' lips, for example. When we say a phrase, Alaha Huba, was that the one you were using? Love of the one breath or something like that, isn't it? Alaha, a way of saying God. Huba, love, but not just a concept of love, but cosmic love. So just knowing that intellectually as we say it is already helpful, even though it is intellectual. But then resounding those two words in our body, I find that incredibly helpful. And music too, and some of the instruments that I've found myself getting involved with ancient instruments from different parts of the world that have been used for meditation, for prayer, for the didgeridoo, for example. I've got lots of these, but they might be played all night, for example, and with one breath, circular breathing. So that it's a bit of a trick, but it's nevertheless one breath, and then the rhythm being made by the body. It's pure meditation for me, and that could go on all the time and not stop. So, but the meditation is going deeper all the time, of course. And then there are instruments like the ney flute here. This one is Egyptian. But there are Persian ney flutes and Arabic ney flutes, the shakuhachi and the bansuri. Shakuhachi from Japan or China originally, and the bansuri, an Indian flute. They are all played in different ways, and the position of the mouth is different for each one, so they are all really challenging to learn to play. I might do a little recording of a few of these sounds later on. But your lips have to develop all kinds of muscles to play them. This one you play on the top, this one you play across the top, and this one is played transversely. But even learning to play them is meditation. Because the breath is working with the breath, working with the body, working with the sound. But I'm also interested in what you were saying, Viv, about the abstract sound, the sound of the universe, the sound of all things that we can't hear with our ears. But it is a vibration that we can behold, and the mystics, many of them from different traditions, speak of this sound, and it's there in our scriptures. The vibration in the beginning was the Word was with God, John's Gospel. Word vibration, dava in Hebrew or Aramaic. It's not just word, and of course that's got the connotations of wisdom and all of that as well, but it is vibration. So everything that comes into being via vibration, and that vibration is continuous. And I feel that all these instruments that have been played throughout the world in different parts, and what's remarkable about so many of them is that they are very similar. The basic flute has been found in caves all over the world with the same kind of structure, often a pentatonic scale, but holes in the same places. The length is understood to be how you get the different depth of tone, different keys and so on. There's didgeridoos found in the peat bogs in Ireland, made of different material to what the Aboriginals of Australia use, but it's something universal about it, and I think the abstract sound is something we connect with in our contemplative life.
Yes, one of the things the Sufis say was that the universe was born out of the out breath of God, which of course is a sound, a primal sound.
Yeah. And the out breath is how you play everything, isn't it?
And we have the word, the Christ as the word, don't we? In that sense, that out breath of God. Tim, your understanding, which you conveyed just now about the instrument, um, is there a way that people who are not musicians can make use of that, of your understanding?
I think so. By listening to different tones, there are different tones which have been connected by various people to different chakra within our bodies. There are two particular tones which for me are very helpful, and in Western understanding of music these days, because the pitch has been changed. I think in the 17th century, when a more intellectual approach to the pitching of music took place in the West. And so that shifted, for example, C to C sharp. And so the two keys, C sharp, which many people talk about as being an earth tone, as being the tone of the earth. And if you listen to the earth from space, and there are ways of recording this these days, and then roughly that is C sharp. And it seems to me that a lot of the Hindu music is in this C sharp, and the sounding of Om is often in C sharp. So it's a kind of grounding tone, I think, but it's deeply meditative if you just listen to it. And then F sharp, which is a tone which First Nation Americans used and use for the flute. They use every key, but particularly F sharp for them is seen to be a healing tone. I'll give you just those two tones from a couple of flutes. But it's listening. You don't need to play them. And although I will play different notes when I'm meditating, really one note is sufficient, and there shouldn't be a clutter of notes. I'll just change my sound settings so that I can just intone these two notes for you. One sec. C sharp flute. And then F sharp, healing. It's related as well by First Nation Americans with spirituality. One thing the internet is good for is finding tones. On YouTube, there's lots of recordings of just tones and didgeridoos of all kinds of things. And of course, these you can do that for yourself.
Yes, that you use a lot of Tibetan bowls, don't you?
Yes.
And of course, you use toning as it comes through you in healing as well. And we're going to be having a focus on healing at some point.
I hope so.
Yes, I'm sure we are. When you were playing those, Tim, the candle that I've got burning here in both cases, it was kind of snicking and dancing.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's
really
interesting.
Amazing.
So there is we dance when we hear music. It's even if we do it internally, and maybe I've noticed I play a lot in the woods in the evening, and animals respond. They might come and lie down, or it's there's something universal about sound.
And when you played those two tones, the first one felt to me like the call of the wild somehow, but sort of earthly, but not among people. And then the other one took me straight to angels somehow. I have a friend who works a lot with sound, and she, Noor Shahab, I'm talking about. I don't know if you've ever heard her lecture on it, talk about it, but she once told me that my sound was G. My keynote sound was G, and I had ordered a flute, which I had the intention at that time of trying to learn to play. Totally unmusical I am. And that was in the key of G.
Wow. You'd already ordered it.
But I'm not sure what that, but when I hear that flute played, that touches me somewhere. That, I think the world of sound is enormous, and it is something that can carry one deep into meditation. We have wonderful jazz in the village every month, and even that, although it's loud and clashy, that sometimes takes one somewhere.
Drums are another way, aren't they? Really...
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's got that repetitive nature that you spoke of. If it doesn't have, then it's senseless, isn't it? Drumming isn't repetitive. It is problematic, to say the least.
Is it drumming? What is the sound of one
hand clap?
So we're having a conversation which is ranging, really, aren't we? Where we started off discussing how can we actually sit down and begin a process of meditation. How can we and we talked about posture and breath and sound, or sometimes straight into a contemplative state. It seems to me that in our conversation, within our conversation, we're not being we're not going to be compartmentalized. that as soon as we start to define something, we find that actually the value of as soon as we talk about silent sitting, for example, sound emerges as a strong conversation. So it feels as if we haven't finished or are not likely to finish the conversation, really. Would either of you like to comment on where you feel we've got to in this conversation too?
Yeah. Okay. So I think you're absolutely right. This conversation could be stretched into eternity. It'll never stop. I think we need to just come back to that original idea that we had, or that Viv had, and it's really important that in the early days of meditation, which you could say is learning to meditate, but it's something that we are still learning to do and always will be. And talking about it is even harder than learning to do it, I think. But because we're talking about something there are no words for, really. But I think it is important that that method is part of what we do, certainly in early years of meditation, and probably throughout. We're all talking about coming back to something. We're all coming back to something, whether it is sound, whether it's a mantra, whether it is an intonation within the body, or whether it's as simple as breathing and knowing that we're breathing, or returning to our body posture. And all these are ways in which mystics throughout all ages have practiced what they've done and what they do. So we have talked broadly, but that premise with which we began the conversation, which Viv suggested, is very, very important, and it is the place for beginning and returning in the practice of meditation. So it is focus. We're talking about focus evaporating, really, but there does need to be the focus.
Coming into presence, really.
Yeah, and like the metaphor of the drums, if the focus isn't there, if the rhythm isn't there, then everything is lost. There's no point in playing the drum from that point.
I think what we've really said is that at the beginning of meditation, there needs to be a gathering point for the mind so that one can go beyond the mind, which is what meditation is.
Yes.
But it's like, as somebody said to me, the mind needs something to do. And so you give it something simple to do, like looking at an image or hearing a sound or repeating a word, which doesn't require effort of the mind. So it allows the mind to rest somewhere so that the other part, one can reach the other part. And I think, I think that's necessary at the beginning of the process. But there aren't any rules about what it should be. So one needs to find what works for oneself. Might be a word, might be a picture, might be a sound.
And um, that uh, that facility, that faculty of reaching for something to rest the mind in, it is something that one can, as it were, pull out of one's pocket at other times, like walking in the woods or under stress in life, um, to center and to become calm again.
Jesus always goes somewhere separate, away, to pray.
Yes, before coming out and practicing. Yeah, in life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Because then action unfolds from non-action rather than the other way around.
Yes.
Yeah, my experience certainly early on when I started meditating, and often now, is that when one has loads to do and is stressed and so on, you think, oh, I haven't got time to meditate. I can't spare 20 minutes because I've got this to do and that to do and something else to do. But actually, if you master that and you sit down and you give yourself 20 minutes silence, everything else gets done and flows better and happens.
Yes.
And it's remembering that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And having the courage, if you like, to take the 20 minutes, even though all your mind is telling you is that you haven't got time for anything because you've got all these things to do.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the sequence which you gave us a morning prayer this morning, actually, Tim, I wrote it down: emptiness, stillness, which means joy. From out of that flows action and therefore attainment. This is what we're talking about, really, isn't it? Jesus being in that state and then coming back out and acting and therefore attaining.
Yeah.
I think perhaps we've finished for the day.
For the time being.
For the time being.
This eternal conversation.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.